8 years ago, on a morning that shattered our family, my daughter Serena screamed that she couldn't live with her autistic son, Leo, anymore. She left, saying he wasn't her problem. 7-year-old Leo, clutching his blue truck, just asked if mommy was coming back. I held him close, a silent promise forming in my heart. You won't believe how drastically our lives changed. Please like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. The echo of that slammed door still reverberated in my memories, sharp and cold, even after 8 long years. It wasn't just the sound of wood against the frame. It was the sound of a heart breaking, a family tearing itself apart, and a young mother's desperate flight. I remembered every detail of that morning with a clarity that time had refused to soften. I could still see Leo, my sweet grandson, then only 7 years old, standing utterly still in the hallway, clutching his worn blue truck, his wide, innocent eyes fixed on the empty space where his mother had been just moments before. "I don't have time for this nonsense," Serena had screamed, her voice a shrill, cutting sound that sliced through the morning air. She had pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at Leo, as if he were a particularly irritating stain she couldn't quite scrub away. At 28, Serena was beautiful, vibrant, and utterly self-absorbed. She wanted a life untainted by struggle, a life that, in her mind, Leo's existence had irrevocably complicated. Leo, a boy whose world revolved around order and predictable routines, stood frozen in a moment of utter chaos. His world, so carefully constructed by us, by me, around his unique sensitivities, seemed to shatter into a million invisible pieces around him. His blue truck, a loyal companion through countless anxieties and triumphs, was held so tightly his knuckles were white. Confusion clouded his usually bright eyes, a deeper, more profound confusion than any sensory overload had ever caused. I was 55 then, a grandmother who thought she had weathered most of life's storms. But nothing, not even raising Serena as a single mother, had prepared me for the beautiful, challenging, and utterly rewarding journey of helping to raise an autistic child. Every day with Leo was a delicate dance of understanding, patience, and boundless love. We celebrated the smallest victories, a new word, a shared glance, a meal eaten without distress, and navigated the larger hurdles with quiet determination. His mind was a brilliant tapestry of patterns and connections, but the world outside often felt like a harsh, unpredictable place to him. That particular morning had begun like many others, with its own quiet battles. Leo had woken up distressed by the feel of his new school uniform, the scratchy fabric, the too tight collar. He'd meticulously arranged his collection of toy cars in a perfect line across the living room carpet, a soothing ritual he performed when his inner world felt out of sync. He was a creature of habit, and any deviation, however small, could feel monumental to him. Serena, however, had no patience for rituals or sensitivities that morning. She paced back and forth, her designer handbag already slung over her shoulder, a picture of agitated impatience. "We're going to be late for school, Leo," she muttered under her breath, a sharp edge to her voice. "I have a meeting. I can't be late because of this." Her frustration, a simmering pot over the past few months, was threatening to boil over. I had stepped in, as I often did, to bridge the gap between Leo's needs and Serena's exasperation. "Honey, how about we try your soft blue shirt today?" I'd suggested gently, kneeling beside Leo, my hand resting lightly on his shoulder. It was his favorite, a familiar comfort. He'd looked at me, then at the shirt, and with a soft nod, had quietly accepted the change. A small victory, I thought, a moment of peace. But peace was fleeting that day. Serena watched the exchange with growing resentment. "This is ridiculous," she exploded, her voice echoing in the small house. She threw her hands up in exasperation. "I can't live like this anymore. Every single morning, it's a drama. Every single plan is derailed. I can't." Her gaze swept over Leo, who flinched, then back to me, full of accusation. She blamed Leo's quirks, his special needs, for her own profound unhappiness, for the life she felt she was being denied. It was a familiar refrain, one that had grown louder and more desperate over time. She saw his autism not as a part of who he was, but as an imposition, a burden she never asked for. As Serena's voice grew louder, more frantic, Leo's small body began to rock back and forth, a rhythmic, self-soothing motion. His eyes were wide, glazed over with confusion and hurt, trying to process the raw emotion he couldn't understand. He just knew his mother was angry, and it was somehow about him. With a final, decisive sigh, Serena walked to her bedroom. I heard the muffled sounds of drawers being pulled open, clothes being tossed onto a bed. When she reappeared, she was dragging two large suitcases, their wheels rumbling loudly across the polished floorboards. "I'm going," she declared, her voice flat, devoid of warmth or regret. "I'm going somewhere I can have a normal life, a life where I'm not constantly walking on eggshells, where my needs actually matter." My heart constricted in my chest. I wanted to beg her to stay, to remind her of her son, but the cold, hard set of her jaw told me it would be futile. Her mind was made up. Then came the words that would forever scar my memory, etched into the silence that followed. She looked at Leo, then at me, her eyes like chips of ice. "He's not my problem, Mom," she said, her voice chillingly devoid of emotion. "You want him so much, you can have him." Just then a car honked impatiently outside, a blaring signal of her escape. Serena grabbed her bags, a purse, and her car keys. She didn't look back, not at Leo, not at me. She just walked out the door and into the waiting car, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt deafening. The last thing she said, yelled from the open car window as it pulled away, was, "Don't contact me. I'll contact you, if I ever feel like it." The car disappeared down the street, leaving only the scent of exhaust fumes and a gaping void in its wake. Leo stopped rocking. He looked up at me, his small face a mask of bewilderment. His voice, barely a whisper, was filled with a devastating innocence that twisted my gut. "Is Mommy coming back for dinner, Grandma?" I knelt, pulling his small, trembling body into my arms. I held him close, inhaling the scent of his hair, feeling the fragile beat of his heart against mine. My own heart ached with a pain so deep it was physical, but I forced a strength I didn't feel into my voice. "Grandma's here, sweet pea," I promised, my voice thick with unshed tears. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." The weeks that followed Serena's departure were shrouded in a quiet kind of heartbreak. Every morning, Leo would wake and the first words from his lips, whispered with a hopeful uncertainty, would be, "Is Mommy coming back today?" Each time, I gently explained that Mommy was away, but Grandma was here always. It was a lie of omission, of course, a small kindness to shield his fragile heart from the full weight of abandonment. His little questions, full of a longing I couldn't assuage, were like tiny arrows, each one piercing my own heart anew. I saw the confusion in his eyes, the subtle shift in his routine, the way he'd stare at the front door, waiting. It was agonizing, watching him grieve for a mother who had chosen to walk away. But children, especially children like Leo, possess an astonishing resilience. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to adapt. My routine became his routine, interwoven with therapy appointments, special school programs, and hours spent exploring his passions. He learned to trust my unwavering presence, my quiet understanding. The bond between us, already strong, deepened into something unbreakable, forged in the crucible of shared loss and newfound stability. He became my anchor, and I his safe harbor. 8 years melted into the past, carrying with them the raw edges of that painful memory, though never quite erasing it. Leo was now 15, no longer the small, confused boy clutching a blue truck. He was a tall, thoughtful young man with a keen intellect and an uncanny ability to focus on details that most people overlooked. He had taught me more about patience and unconditional love than I ever thought possible. He had, in his own unique way, taught me how to be resilient. Then, 3 months ago, another shadow fell upon our quiet lives. Arthur, my beloved husband and Leo's steadfast grandfather, passed away peacefully in his sleep. His absence left a cavernous void, a silence that hummed with unshed tears. For Leo, coping with loss was a deeply personal, internal process. He didn't express his grief in conventional ways, no loud sobs or outward displays of sadness. Instead, he retreated into his quiet routine, finding solace in familiar spaces. One of those spaces was the old garage, Arthur's sanctuary. Arthur had always been a tinkerer, a man who found joy in the hum of an engine and the gleam of polished chrome. He collected old cars, a hobby that I had affectionately tolerated but never truly understood. To me, they were simply his toys, expensive relics that took up space. Leo, however, found comfort in the garage. He'd spend hours there, meticulously organizing Arthur's tools, running his fingers over the cool metal of the car bodies, and leaving small, carefully drawn sketches of cars, robots, or his favorite cartoon characters on Arthur's oil-stained workbench, a silent tribute to the grandfather he missed so dearly. It was one sweltering afternoon just a few weeks after Arthur's funeral that Leo came to me, his eyes wide with an unusual intensity. He had been in the garage for hours. "Grandma," he said, his voice a little breathless, "there's something strange about Grandpa's cars." I was sitting at the kitchen table, poring over bills, the ever-present weight of our financial future pressing down on me. Arthur's passing had not only left an emotional void, but a practical one. Funeral expenses had been substantial, and now relying solely on my Social Security, I worried constantly about our ability to maintain the house, about Leo's future. The cars, I thought vaguely, might fetch a decent price, but I assumed they were just old, used vehicles that needed repairs. "Strange, honey?" I asked, trying to sound engaged while my mind wrestled with the figures on the utility bill. "What do you mean?" Leo walked over to the table and, with a precision that was characteristic of him, pointed to a faded magazine clipping I hadn't noticed he was holding. It was an advertisement for a classic car auction. "The numbers don't match," he explained, his finger tracing a line on the page, then tapping his temple. I looked up the VINs for the cars in the garage. "These are really old cars, but they're in really good condition. And really old cars in good condition are worth a lot of money, Grandma. A lot." My head snapped up. I looked at him, truly looked at him. Leo's gift, his incredible eye for detail, his ability to spot patterns and discrepancies that others missed, had always amazed me. He saw the world in a way most of us couldn't. I had once dismissed his fascination with car models and engine specifications as just another one of his special interests. But now a flicker of something else, something significant, sparked within me. "Show me," I said, pushing the bills aside, a sudden rush of adrenaline cutting through my weariness. "Show me exactly what you mean." He led me to the garage, a place I usually only ventured into for laundry. The air was thick with the scent of oil and old leather, a comforting blend that spoke of Arthur's presence. Leo walked straight to a car draped in a dusty canvas cover parked neatly in the corner. With a flourish, he pulled the cover back. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't a car enthusiast, but even I could recognize the sleek, predatory lines of the vehicle before me. It was a 1967 Shelby Cobra, its vibrant blue paint still gleaming beneath a fine layer of dust, two white racing stripes running down its hood. It looked brand new. "This one," Leo said, his voice hushed with reverence, "is very rare. Very, very rare. I estimate its value to be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, depending on its history and documentation." My jaw dropped. $500,000? $1 million? For a car? Arthur, a retired factory worker with a modest pension, couldn't possibly have afforded such a thing. My mind reeled, but Leo wasn't finished. He moved to another covered vehicle, pulling off its shroud to reveal a fiery orange 1970 Plymouth Hemacuda, its aggressive stance and iconic hood scoop unmistakable. "And this one," he continued, "is also incredibly valuable. Not as much as the Cobra, but easily in the high six figures." Then with a final reveal, he uncovered a striking black 1969 Dodge Daytona, its towering wing a testament to its racing pedigree. "And this is a legend." I stood there, surrounded by what looked like an impromptu museum of automotive masterpieces, utterly speechless. These weren't just old cars, these were treasures, meticulously maintained and hidden in plain sight. How had Arthur afforded them? Why had he never mentioned their true worth? Why had he kept this a secret from me, his wife of 50 years? Leo, sensing my disbelief and confusion, offered his own quiet conclusion after 3 days of relentless research. His fingers flying across the laptop keys, his mind sifting through databases and auction results. He looked up at me, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. Grandpa, he stated with calm certainty, had really good taste and really good hiding skills. The days that followed Leo's incredible discovery were a whirlwind of activity, a blur of polished shoes and hushed, reverent voices in Arthur's garage. Appraisers, specialists from renowned auction houses, and classic car experts descended upon our humble home. Their eyes, accustomed to seeing rare and valuable vehicles, still lit up with an almost childlike wonder as they gazed upon Arthur's collection, each car a gleaming testament to his secret passion and meticulous care. Leo, with his uncanny memory for details, provided dates, production numbers, and historical facts that astounded even the seasoned professionals. He was in his element, a quiet expert guiding them through a hidden treasure trove. When the final appraisal came in, I held the document in trembling hands, my vision blurring. It was a staggering $18 million. $18 million. For a collection of cars hidden in our ordinary suburban garage. The number was so immense, so utterly beyond anything I had ever imagined, that it felt surreal, like a lottery win I hadn't even bought a ticket for. My mind flashed back to the endless nights of worrying about bills, the quiet desperation of trying to make ends meet after Arthur retired, and the constant fear of not having enough for Leo's specialized care. All those anxieties, all those sleepless nights, suddenly evaporated in the face of this extraordinary, unexpected wealth. A wave of profound relief washed over me. So potent it brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't about the money itself, not really. It was about what it represented. Leo's future, once a source of constant worry, was now secure. College, a home of his own, the specialized support he might need as an adult. All of it was now within reach. For the first time since his diagnosis, I stopped worrying about what would happen to him after I was gone. Arthur, in his quiet, understated way, had provided for us in a manner I never could have dreamed of. It was a final, magnificent act of love. But the sweetness of that relief, the quiet joy of security, was short-lived. It was shattered brutally and completely, exactly 1 week after the final appraisal, when happiness twisted into a cold terror. I was watering the petunias on the porch when a sleek silver sedan, unfamiliar and expensive-looking, glided silently into our driveway. My heart gave an immediate, sickening lurch. The driver's side window purred down, revealing a face I knew all too well. A face that had haunted my dreams and my waking thoughts for 8 long years. Serena. She looked exactly the same, as if time had paused for her the moment she walked out our door. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her clothes impeccably tailored. Not a wrinkle, not a shadow of the struggles that had marked our lives. She looked vibrant, successful, utterly unchanged. Beside her, in the passenger seat, sat a man in a dark, expensive-looking suit, a sleek leather briefcase resting on his lap. He had the cold, unblinking gaze of a shark. A primal instinct, a desperate need to protect Leo, seized me. He was inside, in his room, listening to his favorite classical music. I absolutely could not let him see her. Not yet, maybe not ever. I stood my ground, gripping the watering can so tightly my knuckles were white, blocking the entrance to our home with my very presence. Serena stepped out of the car, a sickeningly sweet smile plastered on her face, a performance I knew all too well. "Hello, Ellie," she purred, her voice dripping with an artificial warmth that grated on my nerves. She glanced pointedly at the door. "May we come in?" My voice, though trembling internally, was firm. "Oh, Serena, you may not. State your business from right where you are." I could feel the tension radiating from her, a barely contained impatience beneath the veneer of politeness. The man in the suit stepped forward, a practiced, almost robotic movement. He extended a hand, which I pointedly ignored. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice smooth and professional. "My name is Mr. Bennett, and I am here representing Ms. Serena Miller in a legal matter concerning the custody of her son, Leo Miller." My blood ran cold. Custody? The audacity. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of anger and fear. "Custody?" I scoffed, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Serena gave up her right to call Leo her son 8 years ago when she walked out that door and left him behind without a second glance." The memory, raw and painful, fueled my indignation. "She abandoned him, Mr. Bennett. She called him nonsense. and not her problem. She told me to have him. Serena's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. The sweet smile twisted into a grimace of frustration, a flash of the old, selfish Serena I knew. "That's not fair, Mom," she snapped, her voice losing its manufactured calm. "I was young, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing, and I want my son back. I've had time to think, to mature. I'm ready now." She even managed to squeeze out a few crocodile tears, though her eyes remained dry and calculating. My laugh was short, sharp, and entirely humorless. "Your timing, Serena," I retorted, my voice laced with venom, "is incredibly interesting, wouldn't you say? Especially considering it comes right after Leo inherits a substantial amount of money. $18 million to be precise. Is that what mature means to you now? Following the scent of money?" The man in the suit, Mr. Bennett, remained impassive, but a flicker of something, perhaps surprise, crossed Serena's face before she quickly masked it. My words hung in the air, a stark challenge, and the unspoken truth between us was suddenly louder than any shouted accusation. Mr. Bennett, unperturbed by my accusation, cleared his throat with a practiced ease. "Mrs. Miller, my client, was, of course, made aware of the recent appraisal. However, Mrs. Miller assures me that her renewed desire for custody is not, in fact, financially motivated. She has been in extensive therapy for the past several years, working through her past issues and preparing herself to be the mother Leo deserves." His words, smooth as polished stone, felt like a deliberate insult. I almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that caught in my throat. "Therapy?" I scoffed, my gaze flicking between the two of them. "Preparing? For what exactly? Leo doesn't even remember you, Serena. He was 7 when you walked out. Now he's 15, a wonderful, thoughtful, thriving young man. He's happy. He's healthy. He has a routine, stability, and love here. He has never once asked for you in the last 8 years." My voice rose with indignation. "You want to disrupt his entire life, uproot him, because he's suddenly valuable to you? Because there's a fortune involved?" Serena's carefully composed expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. The pretense of a contrite mother vanished, replaced by a cold, unwavering determination. "He's my son," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "Legally, biologically, he's mine, and I have every right to claim custody. You have no right to keep my child from me, Mom." Mr. Bennett stepped forward, his presence even more intimidating up close. "Ms. Miller is correct, Mrs. Miller," he interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Under Massachusetts law, a biological parent holds significant rights. Unless Ms. Miller formally relinquished her parental rights, which to our knowledge she never did, or if you legally adopted Leo, your position, while emotionally compelling, is legally tenuous." He paused, letting his words sink in. "From a legal standpoint, Ms. Miller simply left the child in your care temporarily while she addressed personal issues and prepared herself for the demands of motherhood. She is now ready to resume her responsibilities." "Temporarily?" I shrieked, the word a raw, furious explosion from my lips. 8 years is not temporary, Mr. Bennett. 8 years is a lifetime before a child. 8 years of silence, of absence, of abandonment. My hands clenched into fists, shaking with a rage that threatened to consume me. He held up a hand, a gesture of placid authority that only infuriated me further. "The length of time, while impactful emotionally, is less relevant than the formal procedures, Mrs. Miller. The law tends to favor biological parents unless there is clear evidence of unfitness, abuse, or a formal relinquishment. We are prepared to file for full custody immediately, citing Ms. Miller's renewed stability and financial capability, and arguing that an elderly grandmother in her 60s might be less suitable to provide the long-term, active care a teenager requires." The words elderly grandmother hung in the air, a deliberate barb. I was 63, yes, but I was healthy, energetic, and completely devoted to Leo. The sting of it, however, was undeniable. Would a judge really see it that way? Would they dismiss my 8 years of sacrifice and love, my unwavering presence, simply because of my age? The thought was terrifying. As Serena and Mr. Bennett finally retreated to their car, leaving behind a chilling silence. I stumbled back into the house, my legs weak. The afternoon blurred into a frantic sequence of phone calls. I contacted every lawyer I knew, every name I could find. Each conversation, each consultation delivered the same depressing news, echoing Mr. Bennett's chilling assessment. Mrs. Miller, one lawyer explained gently, without formal adoption papers or a documented legal relinquishment of parental rights by Serena, your legal standing is precarious. In the eyes of the law, she is still his mother. You're the grandparent, and while you've provided excellent care, the courts generally lean towards biological parents in custody disputes, especially if they can demonstrate a willingness and capacity to care for the child. Another Ms. Davies, who would eventually become my chosen counsel, was more blunt. Ellie, we have a fight on our hands. Unless we can prove she's currently unfit, and that's a high bar, usually involving demonstrable neglect or abuse, or unless Leo himself expresses a strong and articulate preference to stay with you, the odds are in our favor. The fact that she just reappeared, ostensibly ready to parent, complicates things immensely. It looks like she had a rough patch, sought help, and now wants her son back. It's a compelling narrative for a judge, however infuriating it is for you. The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, crumbling away. All the relief, all the security I had felt just days before was swallowed by a tidal wave of fear. Legal technicalities, cold, impersonal statutes, threatened to rip Leo away from the only stable home he had ever known, to shatter the quiet life we had so carefully built. It was a nightmare, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Serena wouldn't rest until she had her hands on Arthur's inheritance. Leo merely the key to unlock it. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with what happens next. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. That night, sleep was a distant, unattainable luxury. I lay awake, staring at the shadows dancing on my bedroom ceiling, my mind a relentless whirlwind of fear and indignation. Serena's icy words, Mr. Bennett's chilling legal pronouncements, and the overwhelming weight of Arthur's immense inheritance swirled together, creating a suffocating knot of anxiety in my chest. Most of all, I worried about Leo. How would I explain this to him? How could I possibly convey the complexity of a mother's sudden mercenary return without shattering the calm, stable world we had so painstakingly built for him? It was around 3 a.m. when a soft shuffle outside my door broke through the oppressive silence. A moment later, Leo's slender form appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. He rarely woke during the night, so his presence was startling. "Grandma," he asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Are you okay?" I sat up, trying to compose myself, to plaster on a brave face. "Of course, sweet pea," I lied, my voice betraying a tremor I couldn't quite control. "Just having a little trouble sleeping. Go back to bed, honey." But Leo, with his unique perception, wasn't easily fooled. He had an innate ability to cut through pretense, to see the raw emotion beneath the surface. He walked closer, his eyes usually focused on the patterns in the rug or the dust motes dancing in the moonlight, now fixed intently on my face. His intense gaze felt like while peeling back the layers of my carefully constructed facade. "Something's wrong," he stated, not asked, his voice utterly devoid of accusation. Simply an observation of fact. His certainty, his quiet understanding, disarmed me. I sighed, running a weary hand through my hair. There was no point in hiding it from him. He deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as his young heart could bear. I patted the bed beside me. "Come sit, Leo." He settled beside me, his long legs dangling over the edge of the mattress. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words, the gentlest way to introduce the ghost of his past. "Leo," I began, my voice soft and deliberate, Do you remember your mother at all?" His hands, which had been resting loosely on his knees, tightened slightly, a subtle but telling movement. He paused, his gaze drifting to some distant point, clearly sifting through memories. "The lady who used to live here?" he finally replied, his voice neutral, detached, as if speaking of a character in a book rather than a flesh-and-blood parent. There was no warmth, no longing, just a factual recollection. It was a stark reminder of how completely Serena had erased herself from his life. I nodded, feeling a fresh pang of sorrow. Yes, honey, Serena, your mother, she wants to see you again. Leo didn't react with surprise or excitement or even sadness. He simply processed the information, his mind working through the data points. I could almost see the gears turning, connecting facts, analyzing implications. He was quiet for a long moment, longer than I expected, before he slowly turned his head to look at me again. When he spoke, his voice was calm, utterly direct, and held a wisdom that far transcended his 15 years. Does she want to see me, Grandma? He asked, his eyes clear and unblinking. Or does she want the money? I was genuinely taken aback. My breath hitched in my throat. How could he possibly know? How could a child, even one as perceptive as Leo, distill such a complex and ugly truth with such chilling simplicity? Leo, I stammered, what makes you ask that? He shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement of his shoulders. She left right after I was diagnosed, he explained, his voice even and logical. She came back right after we found the cars. He paused, then looked directly into my eyes, his gaze unwavering. I may be autistic, Grandma, he stated, a quiet force behind the words, but I'm not stupid. In that moment, a powerful surge of something new, something resolute swept through me. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was now laced with an unshakable determination. My grandson, my precious Leo, saw the truth as clearly as I did. He understood. And knowing we were a united front against Serena's avarice, filled me with a strength I hadn't realized I possessed. We would fight this, and the truth, raw and undeniable, would be our most powerful weapon. The custody hearing was scheduled for the upcoming Thursday. The days leading up to it felt like an endless, suffocating crawl. Ms. Davies, my lawyer, kept reiterating the same disheartening points. Ellie, the court will see that Serena left Leo with family, with you, a loving grandmother. To them, that could be spun as a responsible decision, not abandonment. She wasn't leaving him in an orphanage or with strangers. It makes our case for proving unfitness much harder. Each legal nuance, each technicality chipped away at my hope, making me feel like I was drowning in a sea of legal jargon. Through it all, Leo remained my silent observer. He sensed the tension, the unspoken anxieties that permeated the house. He would watch me with that intense focus of his eyes tracking my every movement, his quiet presence a constant reminder of what we stood to lose. He knew something monumental was happening, something that threatened the very fabric of our lives, and he was ready, in his own unique way, to face it with me. The Tuesday evening before the hearing found Ms. Davies and me huddled around the kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and my mounting anxiety. She was explaining the finer points of Massachusetts family law, the burden of proof, the uphill battle we faced. My head throbbed, each word from her mouth sounding like another nail in the coffin of our hopes. I felt utterly helpless, a ship tossed in a storm, unable to steer against the legal currents. Just as Ms. Davies was outlining a particularly grim scenario, Leo appeared in the doorway, a quiet, almost spectral presence. He held something small and metallic in his hands, an old digital voice recorder, one of Arthur's gadgets, usually used for dictating notes or capturing funny family moments. I hadn't seen it in years. Grandma, Miss Davies, he said, his voice calm and steady, drawing our attention. I think this might help. Miss Davies, initially taken aback by his sudden appearance, raised an eyebrow. What's that, Leo? She asked. Her professional curiosity piqued despite the grim discussion. Leo held up the recorder. It's Grandpa Arthur's, he explained. I've been recording things with it since I was little. It helps me remember conversations. Sometimes people say things that contradict what they said before, and I like to have an accurate record. A shiver of foreboding, mixed with a sudden, inexplicable hope, ran down my spine. Leo's penchant for order and accurate information was one of his defining traits. What kind of things, Leo? Ms. Davies pressed, her voice now edged with a sharp professional interest. Phone calls, he stated, his eyes fixed on the recorder. Visits, conversations when people think I'm not listening. Sometimes they don't realize the recorder is on, or they forget I'm even in the room. My heart began to race. What could he possibly have recorded? Could there be anything relevant? Leo, with a deliberate motion, pressed a button on the device. The small speaker crackled to life, filling the room with the unmistakable younger voice of Serena. It sounded brittle, annoyed, almost a decade younger, from a time when Leo was perhaps 8 or 9. "He's getting worse, not better, Mom." Serena's voice whined, the recording slightly muffled, but perfectly clear. It was a phone call, undoubtedly to me, though I couldn't recall the specific conversation. "I just don't know what to do. Every day is a struggle. I see a kid who's never going to be normal, never going to go to a regular school, never going to have a normal life." Her tone was laced with self-pity, her words cutting like a knife. Then came a desperate sigh. "It feels like I'm in prison. All my friends are moving on, building careers, having fun. I just want to start over, be a normal person again. Like Carol's sister. She just left her kid with her parents and moved to California. She's so happy now, Mom, so free." My blood ran cold. The words were a stark, brutal echo of the day she left, a confirmation of the calculated selfishness that had driven her. She hadn't just been overwhelmed, she had been planning her escape, seeking inspiration from others who had abandoned their children. Davies's expression was unreadable, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden weight of revelation. Leo, seeing our reactions, calmly pressed another button, skipping forward. The recording shifted, and a more recent Serena, the Serena who had appeared in our driveway just days ago, spoke again. This time there was a male voice, unfamiliar to me, but obviously conversing with her. "Is he still living with the old lady?" the male voice, whom Leo later identified as Mark, asked. Serena's laugh, chillingly callous, filled the kitchen. "Good," she said, an almost predatory satisfaction in her tone. "That makes this easier. I just need to play the reformed mother angle. Talk about how I was young, made mistakes, found myself, blah, blah, blah. The judge will eat it up." Then came the next horrifying revelation, a confirmation of my worst fears. "Once I get custody," Serena continued, her voice lower, conspiratorial, "I'll put him in one of those residential facilities. You know, like boarding schools, but for special needs kids. They have great programs, and they're expensive, but with the money, it won't be a problem." The male voice, Mark, responded, "And the money? Is it really 18 million? Serena laughed again, a bright mercenary sound. "Yep, 18 million, Mark. Imagine. More than enough to pay for Leo's care, and then a new life for us. Travel, a house, maybe even start that business we talked about." Her words painted a vivid, horrifying picture of her true intentions, cold and calculating. Ms. Davies had been scribbling furiously in her notepad, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and professional exhilaration. "Leo," she asked, her voice tight with excitement, "when did you make this first recording? The one where Serena talks about wanting to leave?" Leo paused, thinking. "About 6 months after she left, I think," he replied. "Grandma would sometimes get calls from her, and I could hear Grandma talking, and I could tell Grandma was upset afterward, so I started recording the calls, just in case." "And the second one?" Ms. Davies pressed, gesturing to the most recent recording. "That was last week," Leo explained. "It was a forwarded call from her to someone named Mark." The silence that followed was electric. The weight of despair had lifted, replaced by a surge of vindication, of potent, undeniable truth. Serena had sealed her own fate with her own words, recorded and meticulously preserved by the son she had deemed worthless, only to return when he suddenly became valuable. Arthur's old recorder, in Leo's steady hands, had become our unexpected weapon. I sat there utterly stunned, the full weight of Leo's quiet, meticulous protection settling over me. The recording ceased, leaving a profound silence that was far more eloquent than any words. My mind reeled, processing the years of his silent vigilance, his secret gathering of evidence. It was an astonishing act of loyalty and foresight from a boy I had always thought of as needing my protection. Leo, observing my reaction, explained his rationale with characteristic calm. "I wasn't sure if they would help," he admitted, his gaze steady. "Sometimes adults don't listen to what children say. But when I saw how worried you were about the court thing and how upset you got after they left, I thought maybe it was time. Miss Davies, her initial shock having given way to professional zeal, was practically vibrating with excitement. She tapped her pen on her notepad, a triumphant glint in her eyes. Leo, she said, her voice filled with admiration, these recordings are not just important, they are incredibly important. They show clear evidence of abandonment with intent, not just a temporary care arrangement. She then added, looking directly at me, more crucially, the recent recording demonstrates her current plans to institutionalize you, Leo, against your best interests purely for financial gain. This changes everything, Ellie. Absolutely everything. I reached out, pulling Leo into a tight embrace. My voice was thick with emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and a lingering ache for the burden he had quietly carried. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered into his hair, tears stinging my eyes. You've been protecting us this whole time. My brave, brilliant boy. He gently disentangled himself, then reached into his pocket. From it, he produced a small USB drive. There's more, he stated simply, handing it to Ms. Davies. About 23 different calls and conversations over the past 7 years. Ms. Davies took the drive, her eyes wide. 23, she breathed, already imagining the hours of testimony this trove of evidence represented. Leo nodded. Some are Serena talking to her friends, bragging about how glad she is to be free of me, or telling men she's dating that she's single and available because she doesn't have any kids. She was very clear about that. She never wanted anyone to know about me. The depth of Serena's cruelty, her absolute rejection of her own child, was horrifying. But Leo wasn't finished. He then revealed another particularly damning recording. In it, Serena was discussing Arthur's cars, her voice tinged with a palpable anger. She was furious that she hadn't managed to figure out what they were or their true value before she left. Her voice, sharp and resentful, expressed a chilling regret that she hadn't waited to leave until after Grandpa died so she could have gotten her hands on whatever he was hiding. Ms. Davies's face tightened. This, she declared, her finger tapping the USB drive, proves premeditation. Not only did she abandon him, but she did so with a calculated plan for her own life, and she harbored resentment that she left before accessing your father's assets. This paints a very clear picture of her character and motives. I looked at Leo, my heart swelling with an overwhelming sense of pride and fierce protectiveness. He had seen it all, understood it all, and acted with a wisdom and strength far beyond his years. He met my gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile gracing his lips. I learned from you, Grandma, he said softly. You've been protecting me my whole life. I just wanted to protect you too. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Miss Davies called me, her voice buzzing with renewed energy. Ellie, she said, can you come to my office? Immediately. I've been working since dawn. When I arrived, she looked like she'd been up all night, but her eyes gleamed with a predatory satisfaction. I did a deep dive into Serena's background last night, armed with Leo's recordings, she announced, pushing a thick file across her desk. Serena Miller isn't her full name. It's Serena Miller Carter Richardson. She paused for dramatic effect. It turns out your daughter has been married 3 times since she abandoned Leo 8 years ago. My jaw dropped. 3 times? And she had told men she had no children? The layers of deception were staggering. Ms. Davies elaborated, flipping through pages of documents. Her first husband, Ricardo Mendez, divorced after a year. My research shows it coincided with his ex-wife winning a substantial alimony suit against him, significantly reducing his net worth. Then came Daniel Miller, no relation to you, Ellie, her second marriage. Ended when his elderly mother, who was quite wealthy, moved in and required extensive care. And finally, Jonathan Carter, her most recent marriage. That ended when his daughter, from a previous relationship, was diagnosed with a chronic illness that required expensive, long-term medical treatment. Ms. Davies then pointed to a series of social media printouts, photos of Serena living a seemingly glamorous, unencumbered life. In every post, every caption, she presented herself as vibrant, young, and unequivocally childless, always searching for her next wealthy mark, discarding relationships the moment they became inconvenient or financially burdensome. Serena wasn't just selfish, she was a serial opportunist, and her pattern of behavior was crystal clear. Ms. Davies continued to lay out the devastating portrait of my daughter. Not only has Serena been married 3 times, Ellie, she explained, pushing more documents across the table, but her current husband, Jonathan Carter, is actively divorcing her on grounds of fraud. She misrepresented herself as childless, financially stable, and unencumbered. It seems Jonathan discovered her true financial situation, which is far from stable. Serena is deeply in debt. Ms. Davies's gaze was direct, unwavering. This explains her desperate, sudden return, Ellie. She's not just opportunistic, she's in a financial hole, and Leo's inheritance is her lifeline. The revelation made me feel sick to my stomach. My own child, so desperate, so morally bankrupt. Ms. Davies, seeing my distress, quickly moved to her strategy. We need to get her under oath, Ellie. I'm requesting a deposition. She leaned forward, her voice sharp with determination. If she lies under oath, it's perjury, a criminal offense. If she tells the truth, she admits to abandonment and financial motivation for her return. Either way, we win. Just when I thought Leo had exhausted his secret cache of information, he delivered another quiet bombshell. Grandma, he said, his voice softer this time, almost hesitant. Serena visited the house 3 times when you were out, after Grandpa died, but before she saw us last week. My head snapped up. She did? Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged. She told me not to. She said it was a secret. But the recorder I knew had no such compunctions. He had recorded those visits too. Serena, it turned out, hadn't come to see him. She had systematically searched Arthur's desk, his closets, and the garage. She was looking for valuable papers, titles, anything that might indicate hidden wealth. She never once asked about Leo, his well-being, or how he was coping with Arthur's death. Then came the final, most chilling recording. Serena, on one of these secret visits, had spoken to Leo, subtly manipulating him. She had told him in a gentle, reassuring tone that people like me aren't good with money, referring to him and his autism. She planned to convince him to sign over his inheritance to her when he turned 18, assuring him she would manage it for his own good. It was a cold, calculated plan to strip him of his rightful inheritance. A fierce, protective rage ignited within me. Serena had not only underestimated my love and dedication, but more crucially, she had profoundly underestimated Leo. He was a brilliant, perceptive young man, not a naive child to be fleeced. The fire in my belly solidified into an unshakable resolve. The deposition was scheduled 2 days later. Serena arrived looking noticeably tired and stressed, her perfectly coiffed facade beginning to crack under the pressure. Mr. Bennett, her lawyer, looked confident, perhaps unaware of the depth of the traps Davies was setting. Under oath, Serena maintained her carefully crafted narrative. She was young and overwhelmed when she left, she claimed, and had only left Leo temporarily in my care. She spoke of her newfound maturity, her therapy, her desire to reconnect with her son. Ms. Davies, calm and precise, let her finish. Then, without a word, she played the first recording. Serena's younger voice, whining about Leo never being normal and feeling in prison, filled the sterile room. Serena flushed crimson, stammering, That was taken out of context. I was emotional. Ms. Davies merely raised an eyebrow. Then systematically she played recording after recording. Serena's callous disregard, her social media posts proclaiming herself childless, her discussions with friends about being free. Each one was a hammer blow, chipping away at her lies. Serena grew visibly agitated, her denials becoming more desperate, more unbelievable, when Ms. Davies played the recent recording, the one where Serena discussed institutionalizing Leo and using his money for herself. Serena gasped. She adamantly denied it, claiming the recording was doctored, that it wasn't her voice, risking perjury with every frantic word. During a brief break, Leo, who had been sitting quietly beside me, observing the proceedings with an almost detached scientific interest, calmly pulled out his notepad. He had been meticulously jotting down notes, details of Serena's nervous habits, her verbal tics when lying. He was taking it all in, every single detail. When the deposition resumed, Ms. Davies not only exposed Serena's marriage pattern and history of abandonment, but presented the evidence of her current husband divorcing her for fraud and her significant debt. The picture she painted was one of a serial opportunist, using people, and now her own son, as stepping stones to escape her financial woes. The judge, clearly disturbed by the evidence, agreed to a supervised visitation for Leo with Serena. Leo, to my surprise, expressed a quiet curiosity, wanting to see her again, to understand. He went with me, his presence a silent shield. In the visitation room, under the watchful eye of social worker Ms. Elena Garcia, Serena attempted to rekindle a maternal bond. "Oh, Leo, I've missed you so much," she gushed, pulling him into a hug he awkwardly endured. Leo, ever direct, pulled back slightly. "What did you miss about me specifically?" he asked, his voice even. Serena floundered, struggling for an answer beyond generic platitudes. She stammered about his smile, his intelligence, then pivoted, claiming to have spent years learning about autism, preparing for him. Leo's eyes narrowed. "Can you tell me 3 specific strategies that help autistic people manage sensory overload?" he challenged, his voice cutting through her flimsy pretense. Serena's face paled. She panicked, unable to conjure a single concrete answer. Seeing her cornered, Serena quickly pivoted again, her voice softening, almost conspiratorial. She began discussing Leo's inheritance, offering to manage it for him, subtly reminding him that people like us aren't good with money. Leo listened, impassive. Then, his eyes fixed on hers, he calmly referenced her exact words from the recorded phone call about putting him in a residential facility and using his money for travel and a new business. "I'm autistic, not stupid," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "And I remember everything. I can even quote you verbatim if you like." The color drained from Serena's face. The game was up. She stared at Leo, then at me, then at the social worker, her carefully constructed world imploding around her. Without another word, she abruptly stood up and fled the room. Ms. Elena Garcia, the social worker, scribbled furiously on her notepad. She looked up at me, her expression grim. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "I will be recommending against custody, and I'll be noting potential financial manipulation of a minor in my report." The final custody hearing was held on a cold, gray November morning. The courtroom felt hushed, charged with a tension that hummed beneath the surface. Judge Vivian Stone, a woman known for her keen intellect and no-nonsense demeanor, presided. Serena, flanked by Mr. Bennett, looked gaunt, her eyes hollow, the polished facade finally shattered. Ms. Davies delivered her argument with a methodical precision that was devastating. She started by outlining Serena's abandonment of Leo 8 years prior, citing my testimony and Leo's detailed recordings. The court heard Serena's younger voice, full of resentment and self-pity, complaining about Leo's autism and her desire to be free. Davies then played the more recent recordings, detailing Serena's calculated plan to institutionalize Leo for financial gain, using his inheritance for her own extravagant lifestyle. She referenced Ms. Elena Garcia's social worker report, which corroborated Leo's account of the supervised visit and highlighted Serena's lack of genuine interest in her son's well-being, coupled with her blatant attempts at financial manipulation. Ms. Davies concluded her argument with a powerful statement. "Your Honor," she declared, her voice resonating through the courtroom, "Serena Miller's petition for custody is not driven by love or a desire to parent. It is purely, unequivocally, financially motivated. Her actions demonstrate a clear pattern of prioritizing personal convenience and monetary gain over the welfare of her child. We ask this court to grant permanent legal guardianship to Eleanor Hamilton, who has been Leo's only true parent for 8 years, and to secure Leo's future by terminating Serena Miller's parental rights." Mr. Bennett's defense was a desperate, rambling affair. He tried to claim the recordings were inadmissible, taken out of context, or even doctored. He pleaded for a second chance for a repentant mother, painting Serena as a victim of her own youth and past struggles. But his words lacked conviction, hollow against the undeniable evidence. Then Judge Stone spoke. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "Leo Miller," she said, looking directly at my grandson, "would you like to address the court directly?" My heart leaped into my throat. I hadn't anticipated this, but I knew Leo was ready. He stood, composed and deliberate, and walked to the witness stand. He was tall for his age, his presence commanding a quiet respect. He looked directly at Judge Stone, his gaze unwavering. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the courtroom microphone. I have autism, but it doesn't mean I don't understand what's happening here. I understand that my mother, Serena, left me when I was 7 because she didn't want a child with special needs. And I understand that she came back now because my grandfather, Arthur, left me a lot of money. He calmly recounted Serena's abandonment, her disinterest in his life, and her repeated attempts to erase him from her narrative. He spoke of the secret recordings, explaining why he had made them. To remember, to understand, to protect himself and me. My grandma, Eleanor, he continued, his voice softening. She's the only parent I've ever really had. She has always been there for me. She understands me. She loves me for who I am. He then revealed our plans. We want to set up a trust fund to manage the inheritance for my future and a scholarship fund for other neurodivergent students in Grandpa Arthur's name. He looked around the courtroom, his eyes briefly meeting Serena's, which were now filled with a mixture of shame and fury. The inheritance isn't what matters to me, Leo concluded, his voice imbued with a profound wisdom that silenced the room. Having a family that truly wants me, that loves me unconditionally, is what matters. A quiet sob echoed from the public gallery. I saw tears in the eyes of the court clerk, the bailiff, even Ms. Davies. Judge Stone herself blinked, her eyes glistening. After a short recess, Judge Stone returned. Her verdict was firm and unequivocally clear. She acknowledged the overwhelmingly one-sided evidence presented. She found Serena Miller's actions demonstrated a clear pattern of abandonment, neglect, and self-interest, with a blatant disregard for the welfare of her child. Therefore, Judge Stone announced, her voice ringing with authority, this court grants permanent legal guardianship of Leo Miller to Eleanor Hamilton. Furthermore, given the egregious nature of the abandonment and the subsequent attempts at financial manipulation, the parental rights of Serena Miller are hereby terminated. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. A restraining order is also issued, she continued, preventing Serena Miller from contacting Leo Miller until he reaches the age of 18, at which point he may choose to initiate contact, if he so desires. Mr. Bennett gathered his papers in defeated silence. Serena, her face ashen, stumbled out of the courtroom, a broken woman, utterly defeated by the truth she had tried so desperately to hide. Leo turned to me, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. I'm free, Grandma, he whispered, his eyes sparkling with relief. We're both free. 6 months later, our lives had transformed, not just financially, but profoundly. With Ms. Davies' help, Leo and I established a robust trust fund for his future, ensuring his college education and long-term support. We also proudly launched the Arthur Hamilton Memorial Scholarship, dedicated to providing educational opportunities for neurodivergent students, a beautiful legacy that would echo Arthur's quiet generosity. We kept one of Arthur's classic cars, a gleaming red Mustang, as a reminder of his hidden passion, and sold the others, using a portion of the funds to move into a larger house in a supportive, inclusive neighborhood that had an excellent school system for Leo. Leo thrived. He joined the chess club, found a passion for computer programming, and even made a few close friends who appreciated his unique mind. I, in turn, found a new purpose, volunteering with a local autism advocacy group, sharing our story, and offering support to other families. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Leo asked, Grandma, what happened to Serena? I hesitated, then decided on the truth. She's struggling, honey, financially. She's living with her mother now, your great-grandmother. Leo was quiet for a long moment, watching the colors fade from the squanty. I used to think I wanted her to suffer, he admitted softly, a surprising honesty in his voice. But now I just want her to stay away from us. I just want peace, Aman. His wisdom, once again profound and deeply moving, struck me. I reflected on our journey, my initial worries, the fear that had gripped me. But through it all, Leo's strength, his unwavering spirit, had been our guiding light. He had once told me with a quiet certainty, you saw me as I actually am, instead of trying to turn me into someone else. And that, I realized, was the core of everything. Our inheritance wasn't just the $18 million. It was the unbreakable bonds forged between people who choose to care for each other unconditionally, to see and celebrate each other's true selves. One morning, I found a small note on my bedside table, written in Leo's neat, precise handwriting. Dear Grandma, it read, thank you for saving me. Thank you for always protecting me. Thank you for teaching me that being different isn't the same as being broken. I love you, Leo.